In the last class, we talked about use state, right? We talked about what is a state and how we can add a state to a functional component, right? I hope this is all clear till now. And we talked about how to have state in a component function and how to have multiple states in one use state function as well. And we talked about how to store values of the input fields into state variables, right? I hope this much part is clear. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, I want to create a small app which is a counter app, and through that your use state should be even more clear. Okay, let me close everything. And I want to take a copy of this app.jsx. I will make a copy and I will paste it again. I have a app copy.jsx because I want to keep this code and I want to modify this app itself, entire app. Let me run this. npm run and let me open this in a browser. It's empty. I want to create a small app called as counter, and this counter app will help us in understanding the use state. So a use state is nothing but what? It is a React hook. As I have written here, use state is a React hook which will help us in manage the state. When you call a use state function with the initial value being passed, it returns an array, which is this, and that array will contain exactly two values. And the first value will be the state, and second value will be the function which will set the value for the state. Now I want to create an app that which is called as a counter, and that counter basically will have two things. One is two buttons, incrementing and decrementing buttons, and a number in between them. And whenever you click on plus button, the number will be incremented. Whenever you click on the minus button, the number should be decremented. This is the app that I want to create. So let me just have the JSX for it. So this is the app. It will contain a button of plus, and it will contain another div which will contain a number like 10, and another button which will contain minus. Now whenever this plus button is clicked, this number should be incremented, and whenever this minus click, this should be decremented. Let me check out. This is how it looks. Let me zoom it up a bit. Let's zoom this as well. Okay, so we already know how to apply an event listener. Many have not attended this class. Maybe it will be clear here. So for every single event, there is an attribute that you can take up. For a click event, you can have an attribute called as onClick. And for this onClick attribute, the value that you will pass will be a function. That's why we are taking a flower brackets. Okay, so here you need to pass a function, and this function is called as increment handler. Okay, so this basically handles the increment part. Let me create this function as well. So const increment handler, it's a function that will help us in increment the number. Of course, when you click on this, it should decrement. So on click decrement handler. Okay, let me create this function as well. Now we need to make this 10 as a state, because this is the value that changes. A state is nothing but a value that will change over time or in the future, right? How do we create a state? Using the use state, right? So let's import the use state. You just have to write import and use state. It's imported now. And then come back here and have the const. Let's destructure right away. number and then the function which is set number. Okay, it's a custom name, you can name it to anything. Now equals to use state, and initial value of the number is going to be 10. And now here, instead of hard coding the value, we will try to have the number. Let's save it and check back, we have the same thing. Now in the increment handler, we need to change the value of the number, meaning we need to increment it. So we just have to come back here and say set num and make it to num plus equals to 1. Okay, and come back here, and whenever you want to decrement it, set num minus equals to 1. Okay, so this will result into a number which is incremented by 1, and this will result into a number which is decremented by 1. Let's save it and come back and check. Okay, I think it won't return the number itself, so we might have to do it like num plus 1, that is more than enough, and num minus 1, sorry. Now if you click on this, it's incrementing the number and it's decrementing the number. Okay, this is a simple counteract. And I'm showing you guys this because I want to show you one more thing. Okay, what will happen now? I'm setting the number 3 times. Okay, let me also change it like this should be 2 and this should be 3. Okay, what do you think? How much time or how many numbers will it should be incremented? Right, when I click on this, how much should it increment? So you might be guessing like this should increment it by 1, like 10 to 11, right? So it should make it like 11. And after 11, I want this to be incremented by 2, so it should be 13. And then after 13, it should be incremented to 3 more, so it should be 16. This is what usually people will expect. Okay, but I have discussed this today in the class that React schedules the state updation, meaning every state update that you set will be scheduled and the updation won't be available right away. Meaning, whenever you set this number to be like 11, it won't be straight away available into the next line, right? And this will be scheduled based on the previous value of the number, which is still 10 itself. Okay, because it doesn't have the old value. It doesn't know that this updation is still there, right? This is a separate updation. This is a separate updation. This is a separate updation, right? So because of this, let's just check once. If you click, we only got 13 because these two will be erased and just one will be having. Okay, so everything will be discarded. Only the last state updation was left out, meaning here the number was still 10 plus 3. That's what happened. Okay, so how do we solve this issue? I want to have multiple state updation, but every time I want to have the latest state value. Okay, so that's when you go with another syntax for updating the state. Okay, so whenever you want to depend on the latest state snapshot of the previous state, then you will do it something like this. Set num, and then inside this, I want to have a function. I should take a function whenever we depend on the previous state, right? So when we are updating this number, we depend on the previous number. To that, we will add one more. And here again, we will depend on the previous value of the num. And to that, we will try to add 2, right? So whenever you have this kind of situation, you should always prefer updating the state using the function. Okay, so this function defaultly gets the previous state, and this is always the latest state snapshot. It will get the value of all the states scheduled, and then it will do the next operation. Okay, so it will always be updated previous value. Okay, so previous state snapshot, and from here we will return the new state which is previous plus 1. Okay, so now you can do it as many times as you want. Let's do it to 2 and let's do it to 3. And here everywhere now the second state updation depends on the previous state, meaning all this should be scheduled and executed, and it will try to pick up the finished state updation thing. Okay, so the result that we were expecting was 16, right? So let's just check. Let's refresh and click on this. We got 16. Okay, so the important point here is whenever you depend on the previous state to update the new state, you should go with the function form inside the state function. Clear? Okay. So let's do the same thing here as well. Of course, you don't always have to do it. Okay, let me cut out this. You can just keep it like this. This is also fine. Okay, this is the safest way. Now let's remove this as well. You can have previous and arrow function previous minus 1. Okay, this is just an arrow function. This value will be automatically returned. Okay, let's save it. Plus minus. Okay, sorry, something is wrong here. Okay, let me just check for the error. Sorry. Okay, the spelling is wrong here. Sorry. Reeve. Okay, so it's decrementing it, incrementing it.